Holy smokes, buckle up because what reaches your ears today is going to freeze your blood cold before melting your heart into a puddle. Picture the scene. A titan of industry, a man swimming in wealth who thinks he holds the world in his palm. Alejandro Villaseñor, the guy who practically owns the real estate skyline and strikes fear into competitors, pulls up to his fortress in the exclusive hills 3 hours ahead of schedule. His private flight got grounded, so he figured he'd pull a surprise inspection at home. But let me tell you folks, the only one getting the shock of a lifetime was him. And what a shock it was. Crossing that heavy oak threshold, he didn't find his fiancée waiting with a warm embrace, nor the pristine silence of a showroom house. Nope. He stumbled upon something that knocked the wind right out of him, leaving him rooted to the spot, paralyzed. Now, before I reveal the sight that nearly gave Alejandro a cardiac event, I have a quick favor to ask. If you've ever felt that cash can't buy joy, or that true love hides in the humblest corners, smash that subscribe button right now. Go ahead, hit that red button, and ring the bell, because this saga of injustice, betrayal, and redemption is just heating up, and I need to know which city you're tuning in from down in the comments. I want to see everyone represented. Ready? All right, hold on tight. Alejandro stepped out of his bulletproof black sedan, looking sharp but severe. The driver reached for his briefcase. But with a sharp wave of his hand, a habit picked up since burying his wife 2 years ago, he dismissed the help. He was running on fumes. Ruling an empire is exhausting, especially when you come back to a place that feels more like a frigid museum than a sanctuary. He marched toward the main entrance. The mansion was massive, a modern beast of white marble, soaring ceilings, and walls of glass. It screamed, "Billionaire," but it didn't whisper, "Welcome." Alejandro swiped his keycard, waited for the security beep, and shoved the heavy door open. Silence. That damn oppressive silence that always greeted him. His fiancée, Camila, was likely at the country club or a spa burning through his earnings, and his twin boys, Santi and Leo, barely 3 years old, were probably locked away in their room with tablets or forced into a nap to keep the noise down. That was the routine, the gray reality of his life. Alejandro dropped his briefcase in the foyer, the leather thudding against the floor with a hollow echo. He loosened his tie, desperate for air, but then he caught it. It wasn't the usual quiet. It was drifting from the end of the hall, way back in the industrial kitchen they hardly ever touched since they lived on takeout from 5-star restaurants. A strange racket, banging, clashing against metal. Alejandro frowned, his pulse kicking up a notch. A burglar? Someone must have slipped in during the security shift change. He moved forward, slow and silent. His Italian loafers made zero sound on the polished tiles. As he neared the kitchen, the noise shifted. It wasn't just banging anymore, it was laughter. High-pitched, crystal-clear, infectious giggles. Alejandro froze. It had been months, maybe years, since he'd heard Santi and Leo laugh like that. Usually, when he came home, the boys were mute, timid, terrified of breaking a vase. But these belly laughs? That sounded like pure, unadulterated life. Then, a woman's voice cut through. Definitely not Camilla's shrill, demanding tone. It was soft, sweet, but steady, humming a happy tune. "Come on, my favorite chefs. Muscle into that dough. Let the flour fly," the voice cheered. Alejandro felt a bizarre mix of confusion and curiosity. He pressed himself against the wall right by the doorframe. The scent hit him first. It didn't smell like sterile cleaning chemicals or expensive lavender spray. It smelled like vanilla, melted butter. It smelled like a home. Heart hammering in his throat, Alejandro slowly peeked around the corner. And folks, the scene before him was something he never, not in a million years, expected to find in his flawless, frigid mansion. The kitchen, that spotless shrine of black granite and stainless steel, was a war zone. But a beautiful one. Flour coated everything. The floor, the chairs, the central island. Eggshells littered the table, and an empty milk carton lay toppled over. And right in the center of this glorious disaster were his sons, Santi and Leo, standing, yes, standing, right on top of the counter. They were drowning in oversized aprons smeared with chocolate and dough. Their little faces, which Alejandro usually saw pale and sad, were flushed with excitement, sporting white flower mustaches and eyes sparkling with sheer joy, and right there with them, back to the door, was Valeria, the new housekeeper hired just a month ago. Alejandro had only ever known her as a blur in the hallway. Eyes downcast, a murmured, "Good morning, sir." Just a shadow, but the woman in front of him now, the shadow was gone. Valeria, mid-20s, maybe 25 or 26, was radiating a kind of electric life that her dull blue uniform couldn't dampen. She was still wearing those rubber yellow cleaning gloves, only now they weren't scrubbing floors. They were caked in pancake batter. Her usually severe bun had surrendered to the chaos, stray strands escaping to frame her face, giving her a look that was beautifully, perfectly undone. "Heads up, Leo Timber!" Valeria laughed, snatching a falling pancake out of thin air. "My turn. Do me!" Santi shrieked, bouncing eagerly on the imported marble countertop. "All right, you're up, Tiger." Valeria gripped him by the waist, anchoring him with a sturdy, motherly confidence that left Alejandro completely spellbound. She hoisted him up toward the mixing bowl as effortlessly as if he weighed nothing more than a whisper. Alejandro stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed. His CEO brain, the part of him obsessed with liability and profit margins, was screaming. "Look at the mess. Get them off the counter. She is violating protocol. She's breaking every rule in the book." But his heart? His heart, which had been in deep freeze since his wife passed, was suddenly thawing. He was watching his sons experience pure, unadulterated joy. Not from a trip to a theme park or a plastic toy, but from a disastrous explosion of flour and eggs. Valeria turned to grab a towel, giving him a clear view. She was stunning. Stripped of makeup, skin glowing with the flushed heat of the oven. But it wasn't her features that held him, it was the smile. It was authentic and patient. Not the forced grimace of a worker tolerating rich brats, but the look of someone who genuinely loved being right there, right then. "Check this out," Valeria mugged for her audience. "I'm pretty sure this pancake is a T-Rex. Roar." The twins roared back in unison, waving batter-covered hands. Alejandro felt a sudden, sharp ache in his throat. When was the last time he had been the one playing with them? When had this mausoleum of a house last felt like a home? Then, the darkness crept in. Camilla, his fiancée. If Camilla walked through that door and saw Flower dusting the bespoke Italian flooring, saw the help playing instead of scrubbing, it would be World War III. Camilla loathed chaos. She despised noise. Her philosophy was that staff should be ghosts, unseen and unheard. But Camilla wasn't here. And for the first time in forever, Alejandro thanked God that his future wife was absent. He remained cloaked in the hallway's gloom, a trespasser in his own existence, witnessing a scene that was simultaneously the most exquisite and agonizing thing he'd ever beheld. Exquisite because of the overflowing love. Agonizing because it highlighted his own failure as a father. It hurt. It hurt to see this humble woman in yellow gloves filling the void left by his late wife. A void he should have filled himself. Alejandro's fingernails dug into his palms. Every instinct urged him to rush in, to shout, to embrace them, but he remained frozen. He just watched. And what he was about to witness from the safety of the shadows would alter the trajectory of his entire life. Because he didn't realize that this innocent breakfast was the opening shot in a silent war within these walls. A battle between Valeria's pure light and the encroaching darkness about to step through the front door. He took a shaky breath. "Just one more minute," he pleaded silently. Let them laugh a little longer. But destiny is a cruel writer. And this brief interlude of peace was about to be shattered in the worst possible way. Alejandro stood as still as stone, unwilling to break the spell. From his vantage point, the clarity was high definition. He watched Valeria take a paper towel and, with infinite tenderness, wipe a smudge of batter from Santi's nose. This was the child who flinched at physical contact, who pulled away even from his father. Yet here he was, leaning into her touch, eyes closed, purring like a kitten seeking warmth. That simple surrender broke Alejandro. It transported him back to the previous night, to a cold conversation over an expensive dinner. He could still hear Camila, wineglass in hand, her voice dripping with disdain. "Darling, honestly, those boys are feral. I suspect a behavioral disorder, and that new girl, Valeria, she's too soft. We need a professional, a German governess perhaps, someone with a spine. Those children don't need smiles. They need an iron fist." That's what she had demanded, an iron fist. Alejandro stared into the kitchen and finally understood. His boys didn't need a drill sergeant. They needed this. Someone willing to get on the floor or lift them onto the counters to make a glorious mess. "Val! Val!" Leo squealed, tugging hard on the girl's blue apron. "It's burning! Hurry!" Valeria did a dramatic little hop, feigning panic to get a giggle out of them. "Operation Pancake Rescue initiated," she announced, mimicking a deep radio voice. With a deft flick of her wrist, she saved the batter from the heat. Not a singe on it. Just golden, fluffy perfection. She slid it onto a plate already stacked high with lopsided, uneven cakes, each one built from pure joy. "Smells so good," Santi murmured, eyes closed as he breathed it in. And he was right. Alejandro could catch the scent all the way from the corridor. That sugary warmth clashed violently with the memory of the cold, expensive perfume that usually haunted these halls whenever Camilla was around. It was such a private moment that Alejandro felt a twinge of guilt just for watching. It felt like stumbling upon a sacred ritual. Valeria crouched down to meet their gaze, even though they were still perched on the high stools. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, catching her face and making her glow. "All right, my loves," she whispered, leaning in like a conspirator. "Time for the magic touch. Do you know what makes these taste like heaven?" The twins shook their heads vigorously, eyes wide as saucers. Even Alejandro found himself leaning forward, desperate to know. "The secret ingredient is—" Valeria paused for effect before attacking their tummies. "Heaps of love and chocolate chips." The boys erupted into laughter again. Valeria whipped out a bag of chocolate morsels from behind the toaster and let them rain down onto the plates. A sharp pang of jealousy hit Alejandro in the chest. There was no other word for it. He was jealous of that bond. Jealous that a girl on minimum wage knew how to bring his son's joy better than he could with millions in the bank. The realization washed over him. He was utterly alone. His life was hollow, filled only with endless meetings, business trips, and a fiancée who, let's be honest, loved his credit limit far more than she loved his children. Lost in the misery of it all, his vision blurring, Alejandro took a step back. He needed to retreat to his office and compose himself before anyone saw him, but bad luck intervened. His heel clipped the heavy ceramic vase resting on the hallway console. It didn't shatter, but it wobbled dangerously, scraping against the wood with a harsh, grating noise. Clack, thud. The sound cut through the laughter like a gunshot. In the kitchen, time froze. Silence fell instantly. Valeria spun toward the doorway, eyes wide and wild with panic. Her bright smile vanished in a heartbeat, replaced by a look of absolute terror. The bosses weren't due back for another 3 hours. She knew the kitchen was a war zone. She knew the boys weren't allowed on the counters. "Sir!" she gasped, covering her mouth with yellow, flour-dusted gloves. The twins looked from Valeria's frightened face to the imposing silhouette of their father framing the doorway. Their instinct kicked in, but they didn't run to him. What they did next shattered Alejandro's heart into dust. They scrambled to hide behind Valeria. Santi clutched her right leg. Leo grabbed the left, both barely peeking out with terrified eyes. They were seeking sanctuary, protection from him, from their own father. The silence in the room turned crushing and suffocating. The only sound was the refrigerator's hum. Valeria had gone ghost white, her mind racing to the worst-case scenario. She thought of her sick mother who depended on this paycheck. She was sure she was about to be fired on the spot for the mess and the safety violation. "Mr. Villa, sir, I can explain." She bowed her head in a submissive posture that made Alejandro's stomach turn. "You're home early. I'm so sorry about the mess. I'll clean it right now. It'll be spotless in 1 second. Please don't." She frantically scanned for a rag, her hands trembling so violently she dropped it. As she bent to retrieve it, she looked ready to break down. Alejandro stood frozen. He looked at the chaos, the flour on the tiles, his sons clinging to the blue fabric of her uniform like it was a life raft in a storm. On any other day, the corporate Alejandro, the strict disciplinarian, would have roared. He would have demanded an explanation for this anarchy and insisted on immediate order, but not today. Today, the sight of their interrupted joy mattered more than a clean floor. He stepped slowly into the kitchen, his shoes clicking against the tile. Valeria squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the shouting match. The boys buried their faces deeper into her apron. Alejandro stepped up to the kitchen island and reached out. Valeria flinched, bracing herself for a reprimand, expecting him to point out a stain. Instead, he swiped a fingertip through a mound of spilled flour, staring at the white powder coating his skin. Raising his gaze, he locked eyes with her. Fear lingered in her expression, yet she held her ground with a quiet, impressive grace. "Valeria," he murmured, his voice deep and serious. "Yes, sir, I'm so sorry," she replied instantly. Her apology was barely a whisper. Alejandro shifted his focus to his sons, who watched him with wary, guarded eyes. Then, something rare happened. For the first time in years, a genuine smile broke through, Not the cold corporate mask, but something melancholic and true. "Are the pancakes any good?" he asked softly, the question hanging in the air like a peace offering. Valeria blinked, completely thrown off guard, while the boys released their grip on her leg, stunned by the shift in tone. "Dad?" Leo asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "Because they smell amazing," Alejandro added, completely disregarding the chaos surrounding them. "I smell chocolate chips. Right, Santi?" The bolder of the two took a hesitant step forward, still tethered to Valeria's safety. "Yeah, they're dinosaur ones. Val showed us how, dinosaur style." Alejandro knelt down, indifferent to his $5,000 suit brushing against the flour-dusted floor. "That sounds incredible. Do you think there's one left for Dad to try?" The tension in the room vanished instantly, popping like a fragile soap bubble. Valeria finally exhaled, her shoulders dropping. She wasn't getting fired. The beast wasn't going to roar today. "Yes!" The twins cheered in unison, abandoning their hiding spots to race toward the plate and serve their father. Alejandro took the misshapen pancake and took a bite. It was doughy in the middle and aggressively sweet, yet it tasted like heaven. It tasted like home. He caught Valeria's eye over the boys' heads. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Valeria turned a deep shade of crimson and nodded, casting her gaze downward with a shy smile. A warmth spread through Alejandro's chest. He opened his mouth to offer help, even though he was useless in a kitchen. Suddenly, the shrill scream of the front doorbell sliced through the moment like a blade. Ding-dong, ding-dong. The sound was relentless, demanding, and utterly obnoxious. Alejandro's smile evaporated. Valeria froze like a statue, and the children's laughter died instantly. He checked his watch. Impossible. It was far too early for visitors unless— "Alejandro, open up! I know you're in there. I saw the chauffeur's car," a muffled voice shouted from outside. Alejandro's blood ran cold. Camila. She was early, and while he had found grace in the mess, he knew with absolute certainty that she would show no mercy. The witch, as the staff secretly christened her, was about to storm their little sanctuary of flower and joy. In that split second, Alejandro realized the ceasefire was over. "Oh God, no," Valeria whispered, horrified by her stained apron and the disastrous kitchen. "Clean the boys up now," Alejandro commanded, not as a boss, but as a desperate co-conspirator. "I'll stall her," but time had already run out. The sharp clack, clack, clack of stiletto heels echoed against the marble hallway, thundering toward the kitchen like an approaching hurricane. The antagonist had arrived, and the clash between Valeria's warmth and the intruder's impending frost was going to be catastrophic. Can you feel that? That tightening in your chest? Because I certainly can. It's that precise second where fragile newfound happiness is threatened to be shattered into a million shards. The doorbell wasn't just an announcement, it was a verdict. Alejandro, a tycoon who just rediscovered his soul over pancakes and a kind-hearted nanny, is now crashing back into a reality he's avoided for years. What unfolds in this kitchen over the next few minutes will determine the fate of everyone in this room. If you've ever had to hide your joy just because a bitter person walked into the room to destroy it, hit that like button right now because you know exactly how terrified Valeria feels. The ringing finally ceased, but the phantom echoes continued to bounce off the mansion's cold walls. Inside the kitchen, the warm, vanilla-scented air turned frigid in a heartbeat. Valeria snapped out of her trance, jolted from a beautiful dream straight into a living nightmare, her eyes wide with sheer terror. She scanned the disaster zone. Floor coated in white dust, eggshells everywhere, spilled milk, and the Villaseñor heirs covered in grime. "Oh, Lord, Miss Camila," Valeria gasped, the air catching in her throat. "Sir, please, you have to go. If she catches you here, if she sees this mess, I'm done. She'll fire me and I have nowhere else to go." The panic in her voice wasn't just for her own survival, it ran deeper than that. Alejandro had built an empire on his ability to read people, so he didn't miss the signs. Her eyes weren't fixed on her stained uniform or worrying about the laundry. Her gaze was locked on the boys. That wasn't vanity in her eyes. It was pure terror that they were about to face the firing squad. Sensing the shift in the room's energy, Santi and Leo slumped their shoulders, the laughter evaporating instantly. "Val, is the game over?" Leo squeaked, his voice barely a whisper. A sharp pang of guilt pierced Alejandro's chest, a furious anger directed squarely at himself for letting his sanctuary turn into a battleground where the mere mention of his fiancée triggered panic attacks instead of excitement. "You're not going anywhere, Valeria," Alejandro declared, his voice carrying a steely resolve that caught even him off guard. Just breathe. But she was already scrambling, frantically peeling off her yellow rubber gloves and snatching up a damp rag. "Boys, hurry! Let me get your faces!" she hissed urgently, scrubbing at a smudge of dough on Santi's cheek. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely coordinate her movements. Alejandro watched the tremors ripple through this hard-working woman's fingers. He noticed her ragged breathing, and on pure instinct he shattered every invisible wall of class and hierarchy standing between them. The tycoon stepped forward, gently prying the cloth from her quivering grip, and for a fleeting moment their fingers brushed. It lasted less than a second, yet the connection sparked like a live wire. Her skin radiated this heat of honest labor. His was chilled from the sterile air conditioning of his luxury sedan. Valeria froze, locking eyes with him, stunned by his sudden humility. "I've got this," Alejandro murmured. "You clear the table, I'll handle the boys." Picture that. The mighty Alejandro Villaseñor dropping to his knees not for a board meeting, but to wipe chocolate off his son's cheeks. "All right, troopers, Operation Cover-Up commences now." He shot them a conspiratorial wink. The fear in the boys' eyes melted into shy grins. For the first time, their father was an accomplice rather than an executioner. As Alejandro clumsily but tenderly scrubbed their faces, the distinct sound of the front door unlocking sliced through the air. The keypad chirped. Beep, beep, click. The fortress had been breached. Then came the sound that haunted their nightmares, the sharp, rhythmic staccato of red-bottomed heels striking the marble foyer. Those weren't just footsteps, they were a demand for submission. "Alejandro?" Camilla's voice echoed from the hall, shrill and dripping with that sugary venom fake people perfect. "I spotted your briefcase by the door." "What a surprise, darling. I left the spa early. The masseuse was completely incompetent and practically crippled me." Click, clack, click. The steps grew louder. Valeria went ghost white, sweeping up eggshells with superhuman speed and dumping them in the bin. Alejandro stood up, the boys mostly clean now, and positioned himself squarely in front of them and Valeria, a human shield. "We're in the kitchen, Camilla," Alejandro called out. His tone was dry, unrecognizable. The fatherly warmth from a moment ago vanished, replaced by his corporate armor. The clicking footsteps stopped dead. "The kitchen?" Her voice drifted closer, laced with pure disbelief and a hint of repulsion. "What on earth are you doing in there, Alejandro? It smells like grease." The insult hung heavy in the air before she even turned the corner. Grease? To Alejandro, it smelled like home. To Camila, it smelled like poverty. Valeria smoothed her dress, bowed her head, and clasped her hands over her apron, instantly reverting to the posture of the invisible maid. Watching that transformation cut Alejandro deeper than any verbal barb could have. Seeing a woman so full of light voluntarily extinguish her own spark just to survive another person's ego, it made his blood boil. "It's going to be fine," Alejandro whispered to Valeria, eyes fixed forward, just as Camilla's shadow stretched across the threshold. Santi and Leo grabbed onto their father's trousers. They weren't just hiding behind Valeria anymore. They finally felt safe behind their dad. That, folks, was a monumental shift, but the real trial by fire had just walked into the room. And then there she was, Camilla. She looked flawless, cream designer dress, luxury handbag draped over her arm, blonde hair sculpted to perfection. She whipped off her sunglasses with a theatrical flair as she stepped in. Undeniably stunning on the outside, sure, but her beautiful features twisted into a mask of absolute horror. Her eyes darted around the room, bypassing Alejandro's gaze entirely and skipping over the children without a shred of affection. She zeroed in on the flower spot on the floor, then the dirty skillet, before her glare locked onto Valeria like a pair of heat-seeking missiles. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. The heavy static pressure right before lightning strikes. Alejandro held his breath. Valeria squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for impact. Camila took a deep breath, filling her lungs not with oxygen but with pure venom. We've arrived at the moment we all dreaded, yet knew was inevitable. Take a good look at this tableau, because it is the timeless war between superficial image and human soul. On one side stands Camila, rich, manicured, flawless on the outside but hollow within. On the other, there's Valeria, messy hair, dusted in flour, humble yet overflowing with warmth. And caught in the crossfire is a man moments away from deciding where his loyalty truly lies. I want to ask you something. What would you do if you witnessed someone degrading the person raising your children? Tell me in the comments, because the venom Camila is about to spit is absolutely unforgivable. She dropped her designer bag onto a pristine chair with a sneer of contempt, acting as if the very air around her was toxic. "What on earth is this?" she hissed. She didn't scream, not yet. It was something far more sinister, a whisper dripping with revulsion. "Alejandro, care to explain this nightmare?" "It looks like a barn." Alejandro stepped forward, his demeanor calm but unyielding. "They were baking, Camila. The boys were hungry and—" She cut him off with a high, mocking laugh. "Oh, spare me, Alejandro. Look at them. They're repulsive. And look at this floor. That is Italian marble, for heaven's sake." Camila strutted into the center of the room, dodging flower spots as if they were toxic waste, until she loomed over Valeria, whose gaze remained fixed on the floor. The towering heels gave Camila cruel advantage, making Valeria appear shrinking and defenseless beneath her shadow. "You!" she snapped, aiming a perfectly polished nail at the nanny's face. "You are utterly useless. I pay you to maintain this home, not demolish it. Who gave you the authority to create this chaos?" "Well, speak when you're spoken to." Valeria lifted her head, fighting back tears but maintaining her dignity. "Miss Camilla, the boys wanted to learn how to make pancakes. I just wanted them to have a little joy. I'm cleaning it up right now, I promise." "Joy?" Camilla let out a sharp, cruel cackle. "You aren't here to be their playmate. You exist to serve and to scrub. Look at yourself. You're an embarrassment covered in that filth. You look like some stray dragged in from the gutter." "Enough!" Alejandro's voice thundered through the kitchen, rattling the glassware. The command was so powerful that Camilla actually flinched, jumping back in shock. The twins trembled but stayed silent, staring at their father with wide eyes. They had never seen him stand up to Camilla like that. Alejandro moved deliberately until he formed a wall between the two women. His presence was overwhelming. He stared at Camilla with a cold intensity she had never seen before. "Do not speak to her that way," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low rumble. "She did nothing wrong. She was nurturing my sons, something you, frankly, never bothered to do." Camilla's face twisted, first in disgust, then outrage, before settling into a practiced mask of victimhood. She pressed a hand to her chest, feigning deep hurt. "Excuse me?" Her voice wavered theatrically. "You're attacking me? For trying to protect your home? Alejandro, please, look at the state of the children. She's probably feeding them sugar and garbage. They're going to get sick. I am the only one who cares about their health, and you humiliate me in front of the help?" She leaned stiffly toward the twins, trying to appear maternal but failing miserably. "My poor babies. Look at what this savage woman has done to you. Come to Mommy Camila. Let's get you scrubbed with antibacterial soap." But then, something beautiful and unexpected happened. When Camilla reached for Santi, the boy recoiled. He didn't just back away, he let go of his father's leg and bolted straight to Valeria. Leo was right behind him. Both boys buried their faces in the nanny's apron, smearing more flour on her uniform, seeking safety from the woman claiming to be their mother. The silence that descended on the room was deafening. The visual was undeniable. The children chose the messy servant over the pristine fiancé. Camilla stood frozen, hands hovering in empty air, completely humiliated. A flush of rage crept up her neck as she straightened her posture, her expression hardening. The disgust was gone, replaced by pure malice. She hated Valeria for winning the children's hearts without even trying. "This is unheard of," Camilla muttered, wrestling her icy composure back into place. "You've turned them against me. You've brainwashed them." Alejandro locked eyes with her. "They go where they are loved, Camilla. And right now, this kitchen is the only place they've found any love today." Camilla ground her teeth. She knew she had lost this round. She knew screaming would only push Alejandro further into the nanny's corner. Camilla wasn't stupid. She was a tactician. She took a deep breath, plastered on a tight, fake smile, and pivoted. "All right, Alejandro," she cooed, softening her tone while her eyes still burned with fury. "Maybe I overreacted. The wedding planning has me on edge. I just want what's best for them." She turned her gaze to Valeria, looking down her nose with bone-chilling arrogance. "Clean up this pigsty. I want this kitchen spotless in 10 minutes. Then scrub the children and put on a fresh uniform, if you please. Get that filth out of my sight immediately." Valeria kept her head down. "Understood, ma'am. Right now." Camilla claimed her space next to Alejandro, adjusting his collar like she owned him before planting a cold, perfunctory kiss on his cheek. "Let's retire to the lounge, darling. I'm in desperate need of a cocktail, and we really must discuss proper staff boundaries. You give them an inch, they take a mile. Today it's unauthorized pancakes. Tomorrow, they're walking out the door with the family silver. Alejandro remained silent, allowing her to steer him away, but he paused at the threshold to cast one final look back. His eyes found Valeria, down on her knees, wrapping the twins in a protective, silent embrace. A sharp pang of guilt struck his chest. He knew his fiancée well enough to know this wasn't over. He recognized that vindictive glint in her eyes. As she chattered on about floral arrangements and wedding menus down the hallway, Alejandro tuned her out completely. His thoughts remained anchored in that kitchen, and his instincts were screaming for a reason. Because as he poured himself a stiff tequila to numb the tension, a schematic was already being drawn up in the dark corners of Camila's mind. Firing the girl over a breakfast mishap was far too amateur for her tastes. It lacked subtlety, and worse, Alejandro would likely step in to save her. No, she required a catastrophe, an unforgivable sin that would shatter Alejandro's faith in the maid permanently. Her gaze drifted toward the study, fixing on the desk where he carelessly left his collection of luxury timepieces. A cruel, barely there smile touched her crimson lips. "Just you wait, you little hypocrite," she mused, sipping her champagne. "No one disrespects me in my own domain. You're leaving, darling, but you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Brace yourselves, folks. If you thought that kitchen scene was brutal, you aren't ready for the devastation she's about to unleash. Evil wears many masks, but jealousy? That is the deadliest disguise of all. Get ready to witness the depths of human cruelty, because the real nightmare is just beginning." Have you ever had a lie whispered into your ear so convincingly that, against your better judgment, a seed of doubt takes root? That is the nature of poison. It doesn't kill immediately. It seeps in slowly, drop by agonizing drop, until it stops the heart. That evening at the Villaseñor estate, the toxin wasn't in the wine glass. It was dripping from Camilla's calculated, honeyed words. Following the kitchen outburst, a graveyard silence had descended over the mansion. Valeria, fighting back tears until her eyes burned, had scrubbed the kitchen until it sparkled like new before retreating to her small quarters. The twins were fast asleep, completely drained by the excitement and the drama. But upstairs, in the master suite, a luxurious prison Alejandro shared with his own loneliness, the real war was ramping up. Alejandro sat on the edge of the mattress, shirt half open, staring blankly at the patterns in the Persian rug. His mind kept replaying the loop. Flower flying, his children laughing, pure joy. That sound was priceless. Then, the bathroom door creaked open. Camilla emerged, but she wasn't screaming. Oh no, that would have been far too simple. She glided out in a champagne silk robe, radiating the scent of expensive lotions, wearing a look of concern she'd likely practiced in the mirror. She settled beside him, placing a manicured hand on his shoulder. "Oh, darling," she cooed, her voice smooth as velvet. "I've been sick with worry. I didn't want to burden you with household drama, knowing how hard you work. But after today, I can't stay silent." Alejandro stiffened. He wanted to speak up for Valeria, but exhaustion weighed him down like lead. "What are you going on about, Camilla? It was just pancakes." "Alejandro, please, don't be so naive." She stood up, pacing the room with calculated grace. "It's not about breakfast, it's about boundaries. There's something off about that girl, Valeria. I've caught her, you know, trying on my diamonds when she thinks I'm gone, rummaging through your private desk drawers." His head snapped up. "What? That's a serious accusation to make." "I know, and that's why I kept it to myself," she lied effortlessly, looking at him with wide, innocent doe eyes. "But seeing her today, manipulating the children against you? Alejandro, she's a predator. Those sweet smiles are a mask. She's grooming us, gaining your trust so she can rob us blind or, God forbid, take the children. You know how dangerous the world is right now." The suggestion of kidnapping hit Alejandro like a physical blow. It was his deepest nightmare. Camilla was playing him like a fiddle, pressing every panic button he had. She knew that for all his business logic, when it came to the twins' safety, reason went out the window. "She has a good heart, Camilla. Valeria seems like a decent person," Alejandro argued, though the seed of suspicion had already been planted in his chest like a toxic weed. "The kids adore her." "Oh, please. Children would love a scarecrow if it handed out sugar and let them destroy the house." "Alejandro, they're practically infants," Camilla countered, stepping into his space to stroke his cheek. "You're their father. It's your duty to shield them from the world. Imagine she invites some thug boyfriend over one night. What if we wake up and the safe is gutted? We can't trust people from that background, darling. They aren't cut from the same cloth as us. They have needs, they have hunger, and let me tell you, hunger turns good people into criminals. Alejandro massaged his temples, a sharp migraine pulsing behind his eyes. He desperately wanted to trust the kindness he saw in Valeria, but Camilla's fear-mongering had a twisted, infectious logic to it. "Fine, what's the plan?" he asked, defeated. An internal victory smile formed for Camilla. "I've got it. Surveillance," she said, feigning a sudden epiphany. "We need a closed-circuit system covering the living area, the hallways, and definitely the kitchen and nursery. That way, we get a front-row seat to her behavior when our backs are turned. If she's the saint you claim she has nothing to worry about, right?" Alejandro mulled it over. It felt extreme, a violation of privacy, but if Valeria was innocent, the footage would be her vindication. If Camilla was right, the cameras would be their salvation. "All right," Alejandro said, pushing himself up from the chair. "I'll have the security firm out here first thing in the morning." "Wonderful," Camilla cooed, clapping her hands softly. "But listen, my love, keep it between us." "Not a word to her. If she knows she's being watched, she'll put on a show. We need the unvarnished truth." "Agreed." Alejandro's tone dropped, becoming deadly serious. "Hidden lenses. Total blackout. In fact, not even you will know where they're planted. I'll make sure they're undetectable." A brief, icy shiver ran down Camilla's spine at his exclusion of her, but she brushed it off. She was the queen of this castle, after all. She had nothing to hide, or so she told herself. She leaned in, resting her head against his chest in a warm embrace. "We're doing this for our babies, sweetheart. Only for them," the serpent whispered. Alejandro returned the hug on autopilot, his gaze drifting out the window into the pitch-black yard. He felt grimy, like a traitor in his own home, but the roots of distrust had already burrowed deep. By tomorrow, their sanctuary would transform into a surveillance state. What Alejandro couldn't foresee, what was beyond his wildest imagination, was that the very cameras Camilla demanded would ironically become the noose around her own neck. Because the truth, my friends, has a nasty habit of surfacing, and sometimes modern technology is karma's favorite weapon. 72 hours have drifted by. The atmosphere in the Villaseñor mansion is so thick with tension you could slice it with a blade. For 3 days, Valeria has gone about her duties wearing that same gentle smile. She remains completely oblivious to the tiny digital eyes tracking her every move from the shadows of the ceiling 24 hours a day. Night after night, Alejandro has scoured the footage, hunting for the villain Camilla painted for him. And the result? He sees Valeria belting out Disney ballads while she scrubs the floors. He watches her teaching Santi to tie his laces with the patience of a saint and whispering prayers for the children's health before turning out the lights. Every single frame serves as a stinging rebuke to Camilla's poisonous accusations. Alejandro is on the verge of tearing the system down and apologizing, but human malice and fate move swiftly. It is Tuesday afternoon, and the sun is blazing through the glass. Alejandro is sequestered in his study, locked in a high-stakes video call with investors from Japan. The heavy door is shut tight. Resting on his mahogany desk, right next to his laptop, sits his prized possession, a solid gold Rolex, a collector's item worth well over 200,000 pesos. He'd removed it to type more comfortably, leaving it there, glittering and exposed. From the floor above, the sound of running water echoes. It's bath time for the twins. Valeria is knee-deep in bubbles and rubber ducks. She is distracted and loud, her cheerful voice singing out, "Splish, splash, into the bath." It is the perfect storm, the ideal window for a crime. Camila, circling the house like a shark sensing blood in the water, spots her opening. She clocks the red "Do Not Disturb" indicator on Alejandro's phone line. She hears the giggles drifting down from the second floor. The coast is clear. With the stealth of a cat burglar, Camila slips into Alejandro's office. His back is to the door, noise-canceling headphones on, eyes glued to his monitor. Camilla glides toward the desk, her eyes flashing with a mix of greed and malice as they land on the golden timepiece. She snatches it. The metal feels cold against her skin, yet it ignites a fiery thrill within her. She exits the room as swiftly as she arrived, pulling the door shut with a terrifyingly gentle click. Her pulse was hammering against her ribs, not from fear, but from the electric rush of pure malice coursing through her veins. She skirted the main hall and took the back service stairs, making sure the gardener working outside didn't catch a glimpse of her shadow. Camilla stepped into the staff quarters, a cramped, austere little nook where Valeria kept her meager belongings. There it hung on a flimsy hook, Valeria's purse. It was a sad, battered thing made of peeling faux leather that had seen better days. The visual irony was gut-wrenching. You had Camilla's diamond-clad fingers clutching a heavy gold Rolex, hovering over a bag worth less than her morning latte. Let's see you explain this away. Penniless trash, Camilla hissed, a cruel smirk playing on her lips as she gingerly unzipped the bag to reveal its humble contents. Just the basics: a knitted coin purse, a worn photograph of her mother, a rosary, and a tube of drugstore lipstick. Revulsion curled in her stomach at touching the maid's property, but her spite was stronger. She dropped the watch deep into the lining, burying it beneath the coin purse. She zipped the bag shut, arranging it exactly as she found it. Catching her reflection in the tiny wall mirror, she smoothed a stray lock of hair. "So long, Valeria," she whispered to the glass. "Destroying you was a sheer delight." Camilla swept out of the room, high on victory and feeling completely untouchable. She's convinced she's pulled off the perfect crime, certain that her word will crush a servant's defense. She thinks she holds every card in the deck. But there was one variable Camilla overlooked, or perhaps her ego was just too big to see it. Mounted right above the doorframe, disguised inside a fake smoke detector that Alejandro had personally installed just 2 days prior, sat a tiny black lens, an unblinking glass eye, a silent witness capturing every second. The camera captured every frame, the stealthy entrance, the glint of the gold in her hand, the cruel smirk as she dropped the watch, and even that venomous whisper. As Camilla sauntered down the stairs humming a tune, convinced her plan was bulletproof, the footage was automatically syncing to Alejandro's private server, specifically a folder named Home Security, a digital file that in just a few hours would become the grenade destined to blow this villain's perfect life to smithereens. Downstairs, Valeria lifted the kids from the bath, wrapping them in fluffy towels and kissing their damp foreheads, oblivious that her warrant had been signed upstairs, unaware of the ticking time bomb sitting in her purse. "Are you two hungry, my loves?" Valeria asked sweetly. "Yes," the twins shouted in unison. Poor Valeria. She has no clue that dinner tonight will be anything but peaceful. She doesn't realize that the devil wears Prada and lives under this very roof. But don't despair just yet, folks. Even when injustice seems to be winning the race, remember one thing? True malice always leaves a footprint, and Camilla just left the biggest footprint of her life in front of the one thing Alejandro Villaseñor respects more than his fortune: documented truth. The trap is set, the watch is ticking inside that battered bag, and Alejandro is just wrapping up his meeting. A spectacle of horror and humiliation is about to unfold, and trust me, you'll want to scream at the screen when you witness what Camilla is capable of doing in public. Are you ready to feel your blood boil? Because unless you have a heart of stone, what comes next will outrage you. Night had descended on Mexico City like a heavy, dark shroud. Inside the Villaseñor mansion, soft lighting cast a deceptive peace, that suffocating stillness that comes right before a devastating earthquake. Alejandro had just wrapped up his conference call. He rubbed his weary eyes and reached across the desk for his watch, that gold Rolex that was far more than just jewelry. It was a bequest from his late father, a symbol of legacy and grit. His hand brushed against cold wood. "Nothing." Alejandro frowned, checking under the papers, lifting his laptop, and shifting the empty coffee mug. "Nothing. That's odd," he muttered to himself. He was certain he'd left it right there. Alejandro was a creature of habit, a man who never misplaced a thing. His stomach dropped. Not because of the cost, since 200,000 pesos to him was like 20 pesos to us, but because of the violation. Someone had touched his personal effects. He stepped out into the hallway. He found Camilla in the living room touching up her makeup in a hand mirror, humming a cheerful tune. Too cheerful for such a silent house. "Camilla," he called out, his voice stern. "Have you seen my watch?" "The gold one. I left it on my desk 2 hours ago." Camilla stopped humming, slowly lowered the mirror, and adopted that cheap soap opera expression, a mask of feigned concern that came so naturally to her. "The Rolex." "No, my love, I haven't even stepped foot in your office. You know I respect your sacred space." Alejandro ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "It's gone. I've turned the place upside down." And right there, folks, was when the viper struck. Camilla rose slowly, prowling toward him. She placed a hand on his chest, gazing up with eyes that looked like pools of innocence, but deep down, sharks were circling. "Alejandro," she breathed, her whisper thick with implication. "I hate to be the one to say I told you so, but who else has been on this floor today?" Alejandro froze. "Valeria," he muttered. The name tasted like ash in his mouth, but he tried to defend her. "She was with the boys, though." "Are you certain?" Camilla pressed, planting the seed of doubt. "I saw her lurking in the hallway while you were on your call. She claimed she was dusting, but she looked jumpy. And let's face it, Alejandro, that watch is a beacon. Temptation is a powerful beast. When people are desperate, well, sometimes they just can't help themselves." "I'm not accusing anyone without proof, Camilla," Alejandro replied, though his voice had lost its steel. Camilla's logic, however cruel, pierced through his confusion. "Then let's get the proof," she stated flatly. "Call her down. Tell her to bring her purse. If she has nothing to hide, she won't mind. If she panics, you have your answer." Alejandro felt a sick knot tighten in his stomach. It felt degrading to ask that of someone, but he had to know. He needed to be sure he hadn't let a thief into his children's home. "Valeria!" he bellowed. His voice echoed off the walls. Moments later, Valeria appeared at the foot of the service stairs. She had changed out of her messy work clothes. She wore a fresh, crisp uniform and looked weary but peaceful. "Yes, sir?" she asked gently. "I was just folding the little one's laundry." "Do you need something?" Camilla cut in before Alejandro could soften the blow. "Yes, we do. We need you to bring your handbag here, right now." Valeria blinked, completely blindsided. Her eyes darted from Alejandro to Camilla. "My bag, ma'am? What for?" "Don't ask questions, just get it," Camilla snapped. "Something very expensive has vanished, and you happen to be the only one hovering nearby. So if you're as honest as my fiancé claims, go get your bag and dump it out right here on the coffee table." The blood drained from Valeria's face, leaving her pale as a sheet. "Mr. Alejandro, I haven't taken a thing. I swear on the Virgin." Her voice cracked, and her eyes welled up with tears of helplessness. "If you haven't taken anything, there's no need to cry," Alejandro said, hardening his heart. He hated seeing her tears, but he needed to see inside that bag. The suspicion was eating him alive. "Just get the bag, Valeria, please. Let's get this over with." Valeria nodded slowly, swallowing her pride. She turned and trudged up the stairs, every step heavy, as if she were carrying the weight of the world. As she ascended, Camilla leaned in and whispered to Alejandro, "Watch her hands when she comes back. Look at how she shakes. That's guilt, Alejandro. Pure guilt." A few minutes later, Valeria returned. She clutched her worn, faux leather purse against her chest as if trying to shield the last bit of privacy she had left. The twins, woken by Camilla's shouting, peeked through the banister, rubbing their eyes and watching the scene with fear. "Here it is," Valeria whispered, placing the bag on the glass table. The silence was suffocating. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. "Open it," Camilla commanded, crossing her arms with a smirk she could barely suppress. With hands trembling violently, Valeria unzipped the bag. She began pulling out her belongings. An old comb, a pack of tissues, a hand-knit coin purse, a crumpled photo of her mother. Every object was a testament to a simple, honest life. "There is nothing else," Valeria said, looking at Alejandro with hope. "Empty the whole thing!" Camilla shrieked, losing her patience. She lunged across the table, grabbed the base of the bag, and shook it upside down with force. And then came the sound that broke everyone's spirit. Clank. Something heavy, metallic, and gold hit the glass, spinning wildly before coming to a stop. The golden glint was unmistakable under the lamp's light. It was the Rolex. Time seemed to stand still. Valeria stared at the watch, jaw dropped, unable to draw breath. Her eyes went wide with shock. She couldn't comprehend how it had gotten there. Alejandro felt the floor drop out from under him. The disappointment hit his chest like a physical blow. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, praying it was a hallucination. But when he opened them, the watch was still there, accusing, shining, lying. "I knew it!" Camilla screamed, pointing a finger at Valeria as if identifying a demon. "Thief! You two-faced snake! There it is, Alejandro! There's your good girl! She was robbing us blind right under our noses!" Valeria stepped back, shaking her head frantically. "No, sir, please, I didn't put it there. I swear on my life, someone else did it. I would never—" "Enough." Alejandro's voice cracked like thunder, not with rage, but with pure heartbreak. He felt betrayed, like a fool for ever trusting her. Valeria collapsed, knees hitting the floor hard. Hands clasped in prayer, she sobbed uncontrollably. "Sir, please just think. Why would I do that? I just want to work. Don't do this to me." A whimper drifted down from the staircase. Santi and Leo. Seeing their beloved Nanny Val on her knees in tears, the boys dissolved into heavy sobs and stumbled down the steps to reach her. "Val! Val!" the children wailed. Camilla stepped in with icy precision, blocking their path. "Stay back," she snapped at them. "Don't go near that criminal." It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The innocent framed, the villain triumphant, children weeping, and a powerful man defeated by a lie. If your blood is boiling right now, if you have the urge to jump into this story and shake Alejandro until he wakes up, type "justice" in the comments. Because we have reached the pitch-black moment just before the dawn. The mansion's living room had morphed into a kangaroo court, where the verdict was delivered before the defense could speak a word. Valeria remained curled on the floor, weeping, not because she feared prison, but because her honor was being shredded. For a woman with nothing, integrity is the only wealth she owns, and they were stealing it right before her eyes. Camilla circled her like a vulture stalking a dying animal. "Call the police, Alejandro," she demanded, pulling out her phone. "I want her in handcuffs. Let her rot in a cell for stabbing us in the back. It's the least she deserves. Look at her, pure crocodile tears." Alejandro glanced at the clock on the table, then back at Valeria. His mind was a storm. The evidence was absolute. The watch was in her bag. Logic dictated guilt. Yet his gut, that primal instinct that rarely failed him, was screaming that something was wrong. Valeria's desperation felt too raw, while the gleam in Camilla's eyes, it was a sick kind of pleasure that turned his stomach. "Daddy, no!" Santi screamed, dodging Camilla's grasp and sprinting toward Valeria. Leo was right behind him. The twins threw themselves onto the floor, wrapping their little arms around the housekeeper's neck, crying their hearts out. "Don't go, Val! Please don't go!" The twins sobbed, soaking her uniform with their tears. Even in her darkest moment, Valeria's instinct took over. She wrapped them in a protective embrace, kissing the tops of their heads. "Shh, my loves, it's okay. Don't cry," she whispered, trying to be their rock while she herself was crumbling to dust. Alejandro saw it. He watched a woman accused of theft prioritize the emotional safety of his children over her own freedom. A selfish thief doesn't do that. A cold criminal doesn't comfort the victim's family. "Get them off her!" Camilla shrieked. "She could hurt them, she's desperate." "Silence, Camilla." Alejandro raised a hand. His voice was low, rough. He locked eyes with Valeria. Her eyes were red and swollen, but the gaze she returned was filled with a dignity that pierced the millionaire's soul. "Sir," Valeria choked out, "call the police if you want. Search me. Search my room. Tear it apart. I am not a thief. I love these boys like my own. I would never do this to them." Alejandro felt his heart split in two. He made a choice, one that Camilla was going to hate. "No police?" he said flatly. "Excuse me?" Camilla jumped as if burned. "Are you insane? She stole a watch worth 200,000 pesos. You have to report her." I said no. Alejandro snatched the watch from the table and shoved it into his pocket without looking. "My children will not watch their nanny get dragged away in cuffs. They've suffered enough today." He knelt and gently pried the twins away from Valeria. The boys kicked and screamed, fighting him, but Alejandro used firm, gentle hands to pass them to Camila, who took them with a look of pure disgust, holding them at arm's length to protect her silk dress. Alejandro helped Valeria stand. There was no anger in his touch, only a sad, distant coldness. "Valeria, you can't stay here, not after this. The watch was in your bag. The trust is gone." "But, sir," she tried to plead. "Please." He cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Go. Pack your things. Leave. I'll pay you for the full month, but I want you gone tonight." Valeria realized the fight was over. It was the word of the wealthy against the word of the poor. Planted evidence against invisible truth. She nodded, defeated, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "All right, sir, I'm going," she said, her dignity still intact. "Mark my words, sir, God doesn't miss a thing. The truth always comes out eventually. I just pray you figure it out before it destroys these poor boys." Valeria turned to the twins, her heart breaking. "Santi, Leo, listen to me. Finish your veggies, okay? And promise me you'll brush your teeth every night. I love you both so much." The boys were screaming, tears streaming down their faces, reaching their little arms out for her, while Camilla held them back with a grip that was far too tight. "Get out!" Camilla hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Leave right now, you filthy thief!" Valeria grabbed her purse, the very weapon they used to frame her, and headed for the exit without looking back. Her footsteps echoed against the marble, each click of her heels striking a heavy blow against Alejandro's guilt. When the front door slammed shut, a deathly stillness swallowed the entire estate. The warmth was gone. The house wasn't a home anymore. It felt like a cold, expensive mausoleum. Alejandro stood frozen in the center of the living room, an overwhelming sense of isolation washing over him. Sure, he had his precious watch back. And yes, his trophy fiancée was right there beside him. But deep down, he knew he'd just sacrificed something money could never replace. Camilla finally released the boys. They scrambled up the stairs, sobbing, and the slam of their bedroom door echoed like a gunshot. Smooth as silk, she straightened her dress, a smug grin playing on her lips. She wrapped her arms around him. "You did the right thing, darling. You kept us safe. We're better off now. Tomorrow, I'll hire a professional agency, top tier only. Give it 48 hours, and we won't even remember that trash existed." Alejandro stood rigid, her touch making his skin crawl. "I'm going to my study," he muttered, pulling away from her grip. "I just need some space." "Of course, sweetheart. Rest up. It's been stressful," she replied breezily, her mind already racing with plans to turn the maid's quarters into a walk-in shoe closet. Alejandro retreated to his office and locked the world out. He collapsed into the heavy leather chair, dug the watch out of his pocket, and tossed it onto the mahogany desk like it was a piece of garbage. God, he hated that thing now. His hands shook as he poured a stiff glass of whiskey. Why? The question kept looping in his head. Why would she steal from him? She had always seemed so genuine, so pure. He took a long pull of the whiskey, the burn settling in his chest as his eyes drifted to the dark computer monitor. He nudged the mouse, waking the screen from its sleep. A notification was pulsing in the corner of his desktop. An alert from the newly installed security suite. New motion detected, camera 4, service hallway. Alejandro stared at the text, his breath hitching. With all the drama, he'd completely forgotten about the hidden surveillance. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. Thump, thump, heavy, painful beats. That tiny ember of doubt, the one Camilla tried so hard to stomp out, suddenly roared back to life. His hand hovered over the mouse. He was terrified. Terrified that the footage would prove Valeria was a criminal and crush his spirit, but even more terrified of finding out she wasn't. "Time to face the music," he whispered into the empty room. Double-click. The media player launched. The timestamp read 5:45 p.m. earlier that afternoon. What played out on the screen made his grip slacken instantly. The glass shattered against the floorboards, splashing amber liquid and ice everywhere, but Alejandro didn't even blink. His eyes were glued to the monitor, wide with shock, witnessing a horror that turned his blood to ice. The truth, rendered in crisp high definition. There was Camila. He saw the twisted, wicked smirk on her face. He saw the watch clutched in her hand. He watched as she planted it deep inside Valeria's purse. Alejandro gasped. The air sucked from his lungs. He wasn't just disappointed, he was physically sick. He had been sleeping with a monster. He had thrown an innocent woman out into the cold night, humiliated her, while the real villain hugged him and called him darling. Alejandro stood up. The trembling was gone, replaced by a cold volcanic rage, something primal. That snake made one fatal mistake. She left a digital trail. Alejandro Villaseñor didn't want peace anymore. He wanted retribution. And folks, revenge isn't just best served cold. It's best served in high resolution on a big screen. Are you ready to watch the villain crumble? Because this upcoming engagement party won't be a celebration. It's going to be a public execution. You know the old saying, you never know what you've got till it's gone? Well, inside the Villaseñor estate, that cliché became a living nightmare. It's been barely 48 hours since Valeria was kicked to the curb, blinded by tears, and branded a criminal. Just 2 days. Yet, if you walked through those doors right now, you'd swear the place had been abandoned for 10 years. The light is gone. The laughter has died. All that's left, my friends, is pure, unadulterated misery. If you're a parent, brace yourself. Watching a child break down because they miss the only person who truly loved them, that's a special kind of heartbreak. Hit that like button if you believe kids have a sixth sense for spotting evil people. Day 3 in Mexico City broke with a heavy, gray sky. It was as if the heavens themselves were mourning the injustice. The kitchen used to smell like vanilla and dinosaur pancakes. Now, it just smelled like burnt toast and chaos. Camilla stood before the stove, her silk robe stained with coffee splotches and her hair a chaotic mess. The facade of the perfect woman was crumbling under the crushing reality of actual motherhood. She had attempted to make scrambled eggs, but they were now a charred mess fused to the skillet, smoke choking the room. "Damn it!" Camilla shrieked, hurling the spatula into the sink with violent force. Why is this kitchen such a labyrinth? I can't even get this right." Perched in their high chairs at the table were Santi and Leo, but they looked nothing like the joyous boys from a few days ago. They were ashen, their faces haunted by dark hollows and eyes puffy from endless weeping. They had been wearing the same pajamas for 2 days, fighting Camilla tooth and nail every time she tried to dress them. Before them sat plates of burnt eggs and toast scorched black. "Eat!" Camilla commanded, spinning toward them with a manic glint in her eyes. "You haven't touched a bite in 2 days. If your father comes down and sees you starving, he'll blame me. Choke it down." Santi shoved the plate away with a trembling hand, grimacing in disgust. "I don't want to. It tastes bad. I want—" The mere hint of the forbidden name was like tossing a match into a powder keg. Camilla crossed the room in 2 terrifying strides. She snatched Santi by the arm, sinking her immaculate, razor-sharp nails into the child's soft flesh. "Don't you ever say that name in this house again," she hissed, nose to nose with him. "That woman was a thief. Filth. She's gone. She's dead to you, do you hear me? I'm here now. I am your mother." "You're hurting me," Santi wailed, struggling uselessly. "Daddy! Daddy!" "Your dad isn't coming to save you. He's too busy working to pay for your little luxuries," Camilla sneered, shaking him roughly. "And if you say a word to him, if you dare complain, I swear I will throw every single one of your toys in the trash. Am I clear?" Watching his brother break down, Leo began to scream as well, hurling his glass of orange juice to the floor. Glass shattered, sending orange liquid sprawling across the marble to mingle with the grime of previous days. "Enough, you little monsters!" Camilla screamed, snapping completely. She raised her hand, poised to strike Leo across the face. In that frozen moment, Alejandro materialized in the kitchen doorway. He was still in yesterday's rumpled suit. Sleep was a stranger to him. His eyes were bloodshot. Not from sorrow, but from a cold, calculating rage he had been nurturing for hours. "What exactly is going on here?" Alejandro asked. His voice was barely a whisper, yet sharp as a scalpel. Camilla turned to stone. The hand raised for violence abruptly shifted course, landing awkwardly on Leo's head in a stiff, fraudulent caress. "Oh, my loves," Camilla chirped, masking her malice with a victim's pout in a heartbeat. "Thank goodness you came down. I'm at my wit's end. These boys are impossible today. Look at this mess. They threw the juice. They refused to eat the breakfast I made with so much love. They're driving me insane. They just missed that thief and they're punishing me for it." Alejandro ignored the puddle on the floor. His gaze locked onto Santi's arm. There, blooming on the boy's pale skin, were 3 angry red crescents, the unmistakable signature of Camilla's nails. Alejandro felt his blood turn to lava. Every instinct screamed at him to tear her apart, to roar that he knew everything, that he had witnessed her theft, seen her cruelty. He wanted to throw her out on the street right then and there, but he restrained himself. A quiet expulsion behind closed doors wasn't enough. Camilla had publicly humiliated Valeria. She had shattered an innocent woman's reputation in front of the entire household. The retribution had to be just as public. The engagement dinner was tonight, and Alejandro intended for Camilla's downfall to be a spectacle etched in memory forever. "Leave them," he said with terrifying tranquility. "Go get yourself ready. You need to look flawless for the dinner tonight. My partners, the press, your family, they'll all be there." Camilla's eyes instantly sparkled. Vanity eclipsed her anger. "So the dinner is still on?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "I thought with all this stress, but of course it is," Alejandro lied, staring right through her. "It's going to be an unforgettable evening, Camilla, I promise. A night that will change our lives forever." Camilla smirked with arrogance, convinced she had the millionaire wrapped around her finger. She leaned in, pecking him quickly on the lips. Alejandro summoned every ounce of willpower not to retch on the spot. "You're the best, darling." "I'm heading to the spa for an emergency session to fix this disaster," she said, fussing with her hair. "Oh, and please call the agency. Get someone to clean this up. I certainly wasn't born to scrub floors." Camilla clicked her heels out of the kitchen, leaving behind 2 sobbing children and a man poised to become his own fiancé's executioner. Alejandro waited for the front door to click shut before rushing to his sons. Dropping to his knees on the sticky floor, his designer trousers forgotten in the filth. "Daddy, please. Val, we need Val," Santi choked out, burying his face in his father's neck, clinging like his life depended on it. Alejandro crushed them to his chest, pressing a kiss to the angry red welts on his son's arm. A single tear, heavy with guilt, carved a path down his face. "I know, little guys, I know," Alejandro whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of his failure. I am so sorry. I was blind, but I swear to you, that ends now. Everything changes tonight. Val is coming home. And the witch? She's gone for good. The boys didn't fully grasp the words, but they felt the steel in their father's vow and finally felt safe. Alejandro stood up. Doubt was gone. Mercy was dead. He grabbed his cell and dialed a number he reserved for emergencies. "Pedro," he said the moment his trusted driver picked up. "I need a favor, a big one. This isn't business, it's personal, vital. Drive to the Santa Maria district immediately. Find Valeria. And Pedro, do not take no for an answer. I need her back at the mansion before 8 o'clock tonight." He killed the call and surveyed the wreckage of the kitchen one last time. "Enjoy your spa day, Camila," he thought grimly, "because it's the last luxury you'll ever enjoy on my dime." Alejandro retreated to his study, ordering the staff to hold all interruptions. Silence reclaimed the house, but the heavy air of loneliness was gone, replaced by the cold quiet of a general plotting a war. 3 monitors glowed against the shadows of his desk. The leather chair groaned as he sank into it, carrying the weight of his resolve. Everything had to be perfect. There was zero margin for error. To annihilate Camila before Mexico's elite, the evidence had to be more than just bad. It had to be brutal, undeniable, and absolute. He clicked open the security archives. His hands shook, not from fear but from the rush of impending justice. "Time to show the world who you really are, Camila de la Garza," he muttered. He loaded the primary footage, watching it for the 10th time. There it was, 5:45 p.m. Camila entering. The greed in her eyes, the theft. Stashing the watch in her purse, that twisted smirk as she left. Alejandro felt bile rise in his throat. How had he ever kissed those lips? How had he actually planned to marry her? She wasn't a woman, she was a viper wrapped in silk. He trimmed the clip and dropped it into a folder labeled Final Evidence. But he wasn't done yet. Theft was enough for the police, but to orchestrate her social execution, to expose her rotten core to the world, he needed ammunition. He needed contrast. As he scrubbed through hours of footage from the past week, what he discovered absolutely gutted him. Video 1. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Living room. Camila sat on the sofa, doom-scrolling through Instagram. Santi approached, holding up a piece of paper. "Look, Mommy Camila, I drew a picture of you," he beamed, full of hope. Camila didn't even glance up. "Get that out of my face, Santiago. You're blocking my light. And don't call me Mommy. It's Camila." The boy walked away, head hanging low, slowly crumpling the drawing in his small hands. Alejandro slammed his fist on the desk, a growl escaping his throat. He kept digging. He needed to see Valeria, needed to remember what goodness looked like. Video 2. Monday, 4 p.m. Playroom. Valeria sat on the floor, a fortress of building blocks rising around her. "We're going to build the tallest castle in the universe," she declared. "Yeah!" the twins screamed in unison. Suddenly, a tower collapsed, smashing Leo's finger. As he wailed, Valeria didn't hesitate. There was no annoyance, only comfort. She scooped him up, kissed the hurt finger, and whispered magic words to make the pain go away, tickling him until his tears dissolved into giggles. Alejandro watched her hold him, witnessing a love so pure it radiated through the monitor. She wiped the tears away with such tenderness that Alejandro could practically feel the peace settling over his son. He felt his own vision blur as tears threatened to spill. He had been a colossal fool, blinded by ambition and status, while the only treasure that mattered had been sitting right there on his floor, wearing a blue uniform. He had cast out an angel just to keep a demon warm. He went back to work. He spliced the footage of the crushed drawing. Then the kitchen incident from that morning, where she'd pinched the boys viciously. The cameras missed nothing. They even caught the exact moment he walked into the room. Then came the light. He compiled Valeria's greatest hits, teaching them prayers, singing lullabies, flipping her famous pancakes. He finalized the 5-minute cut. File name, The Truth. He transferred it to an encrypted USB drive, stood up, and paced toward the window. Sunset. Guests would begin arriving in 2 hours. The city's elite. Camilla's parents, arrogant vultures just like their daughter. His top investors. The trap was set. The main hall's projector was already linked to the central server. All he had to do was plug in the drive and press play. His phone buzzed against the silence. It was Pedro. "Sir, I located her," the driver said, his voice tight with stress. but she refuses to come with me. She is devastated, sir. Swears she will never step foot in this house again. She says you treated her like a common thug. She is weeping, and her mother is terrified." Alejandro squeezed his eyes shut. He knew he had it coming. He deserved every bit of her scorn. "Put her on, Pedro. Speakerphone," Alejandro commanded. The line went quiet, save for the sound of Valeria gasping for air. "Mr. Villa, sir, please, just leave us alone. You already fired me. You shamed me. I do not have your watch, I swear." Hearing her voice crack was like taking a bullet to the chest. "Valeria, listen to me," Alejandro said, his tone gentler than Pedro had ever heard from the boss. "I am not calling to point fingers. I am calling to apologize. I know you didn't do it." The silence on the other end was deafening. "What?" she stammered. "I know the truth, Valeria. I watched the security footage. I know who set you up. You were framed. And I know my boys haven't stopped crying since you walked out that door." A soft sob escaped Valeria's lips on the other end. "Valeria, I need you to come back," Alejandro pressed, urgency in his voice. "Not to work, to watch justice get served. Tonight, I am clearing your name in front of the whole world, right in front of the woman who did this to you, but I need you standing there. I need you to walk through that front door with your head held high. Pedro is taking you to a boutique first. Pick out the most stunning dress on the rack. You are not coming back as the help. You are coming as my guest of honor." "Sir, I don't know. I am scared," she whispered. "Don't be, I've got your back. I give you my solemn word. Please, Valeria, do it for Santi and Leo. They need you. And I need you." That last part slipped out, but it was the truest thing he had said in years. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Alejandro held his breath. "All right," Valeria finally said, her voice shaking but resolved. "I will do it for the children." "Thank you," he exhaled. "Pedro will look after you. See you in 2 hours." He ended the call, feeling a massive weight lift off his shoulders. He felt powerful. Not the cheap power of money, but the unstoppable power of the truth. He showered, shaved, and threw on his sharpest black tuxedo. Looking in the mirror, he adjusted his bow tie. The grieving widower was gone. Staring back was a father ready for war. The doorbell rang downstairs. The first vultures were arriving. He could hear the plastic laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. Camilla would be down there by now, shining like fool's gold, greeting the elite, flaunting that engagement ring, completely oblivious that she was standing right on top of a trapdoor. Alejandro grabbed the USB drive, clenched it in his fist, and marched out of the office. He descended the staircase slowly, like a predator entering the arena. The party had started, but the real show? Oh, folks, the real show was just one click away. Are you ready to watch the masks crumble? Because tonight at the Villaseñor estate, champagne isn't the only thing on the menu. We are serving ice-cold justice. Friends, if you have ever been to a shindig where the outfits cost a fortune but the souls are dirt cheap, you know exactly what the vibe was that night. The air was thick with imported French perfume and smoked salmon canapés. But beneath that, if you took a deep breath, you could smell the rot of hypocrisy. It looked like a Renaissance painting. Crystal chandeliers blazing, soft live piano keys tinkling, and waiters gliding by with silver platters. Picture perfect, and completely fake. Alejandro reached the bottom floor. In that black tux, he looked like royalty. But his eyes weren't filled with romance. They held the cold, hard glint of a blade before the strike. He drifted through the crowd like a shark in a tank of guppies, shaking hands and nodding at the empty congratulations on his upcoming wedding. Every good luck felt like a needle to the skin, but he kept smiling. He smiled because he knew the curtain was about to drop on this charade. Camila was in her glory, the queen bee. Tight, blood-red dress, plunging neckline, dripping in diamonds from her ears to her throat. She was parading around with her mother, a woman just as stuck up, flashing that engagement rock to anyone with eyes. "Oh, Mother, I have finally got this place running right," Camilla bragged, sipping her bubbly loud enough for her squad to hear. "Had to clear out the help just today. Can you believe the nanny was a little crook? You know how those lowlifes are. You give them a hand, they snatch your Rolex." Her mother, Beatrice, made a theatrical face of disgust. "How dreadful, darling. That is why I always warn you about letting the riffraff into your home. Those people are always up to something. Thank heavens Alejandro has a strong woman like you to crack the whip." Alejandro, standing just a few feet away pretending to chat up a business partner, heard every single word. He gripped the stem of his glass so hard it nearly snapped. Scum, he thought. If they only knew the real trash in this room was the kind dripping in diamonds. Dinner was imminent. The guests, about 50 of society's self-proclaimed elite, began drifting toward the grand dining hall. Camila scanned the crowd for Alejandro, making a possessive little gesture to summon him to her side. Come here, darling. Let's take our seats at the head of the table. Mom needs to discuss the registry with you, she said, latching onto his arm like a barnacle. For the first time all night, Alejandro's stoic mask slipped. He gave her a look so devoid of warmth that Camila actually shivered. Not just yet, my dear. We are missing a guest. Camila frowned, scanning the room in confusion. A guest? Who? The Garzas are here, the board members, everyone who matters. Nobody important is missing. The guest of honor is missing, Alejandro corrected, checking his watch. It was 8:00 sharp. Right on cue, the heavy chime of the front door cut through the piano music. It didn't sound like a doorbell. It tolled like fate itself. The butler, a dignified older man who had suffered plenty of Camilla's abuse, moved toward the entrance. A hush fell over the foyer. Heads turned, driven by pure curiosity. Who would dare arrive late to a dinner of this magnitude? The carved mahogany doors swung open slowly, and the sight that greeted them made Camilla lose her grip on her champagne flute. Crystal shattered against the marble, splattering her mother's gown, but nobody cared. Not a single soul looked at the stain. Every eye was fixed on the woman standing in the threshold. It was Valeria, yet miles away from the Valeria of blue uniforms and rubber gloves. Gone was the humble girl with the scrubbed clean face and tied-back hair. This was a vision. She wore a floor-length gown in midnight blue, a deep, elegant shade that made her cinnamon skin glow. The fabric draped over her body like liquid, hugging her figure in a way that was modest, yet undeniably stunning. Her hair, usually hidden away, cascaded in soft silky waves over her shoulders. Subtle makeup highlighted her large, expressive eyes that looked ahead with a heartbreaking mix of fear and dignity. She wore no expensive jewels. No diamonds were necessary. Her presence alone outshone every gemstone in the room. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Men watched with admiration. Women watched with envy and intrigue. "Who is that?" they whispered. "An actress? A model?" Camilla turned red, not from embarrassment but from a volcanic rage. Transformation or not, she recognized her enemy instantly. "What is she doing here?" Camilla shrieked, shattering the elegance of the moment. Her shrill voice echoed in the silence. "Security! Security! Get this intruder out! It's the thief! She's back to rob us!" Valeria took a frightened step back at the screaming. Pedro, the chauffeur, stood behind her like a loyal sentry, placing a steadying hand on her back to give her courage. Camilla lunged forward like a wild animal, completely forgetting her role as a sophisticated socialite. "Get the hell out of my house! How dare you come here in those clothes? Did you steal that dress too?" She screamed right in Valeria's face, pointing a trembling finger at the exit. "Butler, call the police! This woman is a criminal!" The guests stood in shock. They had never seen sweet Camilla lose her composure like this. Doña Beatriz tried to calm her daughter, but Camilla was past the point of return. "Nobody is calling the police." Alejandro's voice cracked through the air like a whip. He marched from the center of the salon to the entrance with firm, decisive strides. He breezed past Camilla, ignoring her as if she were an inconvenient piece of furniture, and stopped directly in front of Valeria. He locked eyes with her. Valeria was trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have come. She hates me," she whispered, ready to turn around. Alejandro took her hand, not with force, but with a tenderness that left everyone slack-jawed. He lifted the maid's hand and kissed it softly. "Welcome, Valeria. You look beautiful." The audience gasped audibly. Camilla stood with her mouth hanging open, unable to process the scene. Her fiancé, the untouchable billionaire, was kissing the hand of the woman she had humiliated only hours before. "Alejandro!" Camilla screeched, tears of rage welling in her eyes. "What are you doing? That woman stole from me. She is a maid. Have you lost your mind?" "You are humiliating me in front of my parents." Alejandro turned slowly toward Camilla, his face carved from stone. "She is my guest of honor, Camilla, and she will be seated at my table. And if anyone has a problem with that—" Alejandro swept the room with a glare, daring anyone to object. "The door is wide enough for them to leave." Camilla felt the world spinning. She was cornered. If she caused a bigger scene, she would look like a hysterical lunatic in front of high society. If she stayed silent, she accepted the defeat. Her mother, Doña Beatriz, leaned in and whispered in her ear. "Pull it together, Camila," she told herself. "Don't cause a scene. Alejandro has a plan. Maybe he's just bringing her in to humiliate her publicly. Show some class, for heaven's sake." Camilla took a sharp breath, forcing the bile back down her throat. She shot Valeria a look that promised nothing but suffering. "You're going to wish you'd never stepped foot inside," she thought. But when she spoke, she plastered on a tight, artificial smile. "Well, if my fiancé is so dead set on charity work, dragging the help to our dinner table, I suppose we can squeeze in another seat." Alejandro ignored the barb completely. Instead, he simply extended his arm to Valeria. "Shall we?" he asked gently. Valeria, still in a daze, gave a small nod and looped her hand through his arm. They moved toward the grand dining hall, parting the sea of guests like a modern-day Moses commanded the waters. Alejandro seated her at his immediate right, the guest of honor's spot, demoting Camilla's mother further down the line. Food was served, but the plates remained untouched. The atmosphere was so thick you could choke on it. Camilla practically stabbed her porcelain, eyes locked on Valeria with murderous intent. Valeria kept her gaze glued to the table, terrified to look up, and Alejandro just waited. He was biding his time. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and tonight's dessert promised to be absolutely volatile. Staff cleared the main course. Most of the food went back to the kitchen exactly as it had arrived. You could feel the static in the air. Camilla had taken a few cheap shots, trying to shame Valeria over proper table etiquette. "Careful now, sweetheart. That's for the salad, not the fish. Though I assume silver service isn't common where you come from." Alejandro shut down every snide remark with a gaze like ice. It was time for the toast. Alejandro rose from his seat, raising his baccarat crystal goblet high. He tapped a silver spoon against the rim, that sharp, piercing chime demanding immediate silence. "Everyone, please, may I have your attention?" Alejandro said. His deep baritone boomed through the vaulted hall, bringing the room to a standstill. Camilla wore a triumphant smirk, convinced he was finally about to announce the official date for the mud-or wedding. Or better yet, maybe he'd crack a joke about their stray guest to break the tension. She fluffed her hair, readying herself to be the star of the show. "I want to thank every one of you for joining us," Alejandro began, scanning the faces of his business partners and family members. "We gathered here to celebrate an engagement, a merger of two families, but life has a funny way of showing us what actually matters." Camilla's brow furrowed. There was an edge to his voice she didn't like. It didn't sound like a declaration of love, it sounded like a judge reading a verdict. "In construction, we have a rule," Alejandro continued. "If the foundation is rotten, I don't care how beautiful the paint is, the structure will collapse. And I've recently discovered that my personal life has been built on a bedrock of lies." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Doña Beatriz began fanning herself in a panic. "Today, someone under this roof was falsely accused of a crime," Alejandro stated, locking eyes with Valeria, who looked up in shock. "She was degraded, thrown out on the street, and branded a thief by a woman who claimed to love me and my children." The color drained from Camilla's face. She shot up from her chair. "Alejandro, darling, I think you've had too much wine. Let's just go up." "Sit down!" Alejandro roared. The command was so forceful that Camilla collapsed back into her seat as if her legs had given out. "No one moves," he ordered. "Before I move on with my life, I need to clean house, and I need all of you to witness the truth." He pulled a small remote from his pocket and aimed it. At the far wall, where a retractable screen, usually reserved for quarterly reviews, was mounted. The screen descended with a low mechanical hum, and the room lights dimmed in sync. "Allow me to introduce the real Camila de la Garza," Alejandro said, his voice dripping with disgust. He thumbed the play button. A massive, crystal-clear image filled the wall. It was the interior of Alejandro's study. The timestamp in the corner read 5:45 p.m. Today. On screen, Camilla slipped into the room, checking over her shoulder. She snatched a gold Rolex from the desk. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the dining hall. "Oh my God!" one woman cried out. Alejandro's business partners exchanged looks of absolute scandal. The footage rolled on. Camilla marched down the hall to the staff quarters and unzipped Valeria's worn handbag. A twisted grin spread across her face on the screen, pure, malicious satisfaction, as she dropped the watch inside and buried it deep. "It's a lie!" Camilla shrieked, knocking her chair over as she scrambled up. "That's fake! It's a deep fake. It's AI. He just wants a way out of the wedding. It's not real." But her screams fell on deaf ears. The video cut to a new angle. The footage shifted to the kitchen, revealing a disturbing sight. Camilla viciously pinching Santi's arm simply because the little boy had asked for water. The audio came through crystal clear. "Shut your mouth, you insufferable little brat. I hate you." A wave of pure horror washed over the room. There is no sin greater than raising a hand against an innocent child. Beatrice, Camilla's mother, gasped and covered her mouth as the giant screen exposed her daughter's true colors. "Camilla, what have you done?" Her mother whispered the words in disbelief. Then, the video cut one final time, bringing Valeria into frame. It captured the moment Valeria gently wiped away the children's tears, followed by scenes of her teaching them to bake, covered in flour and laughing. It was a display of pure, selfless love. The contrast was devastating. A witch draped in silk on one side, and an angel wearing a maid's uniform on the other. The screen faded to black. Suddenly, the house lights flooded the room, blinding everyone for a brief second. Alejandro stood there, staring at Camilla with a look that mingled deep sorrow with absolute revulsion. "Artificial intelligence, was it?" He asked the question with a deadly softness. "Cameras don't lie, Camilla. You planted that watch. You are the reason my children were crying in pain. You tried to destroy an innocent woman's life out of sheer jealousy." Camilla frantically scanned the room. She was desperate for an ally, but all she found were gazes filled with disgust. Even her closest friends averted their eyes. Her parents were flushed crimson with shame. Her grand ambitions of becoming Mrs. Villaseñor were disintegrating like dry sand slipping through her fingers. "Alejandro, please, let me explain. I was just so stressed." "I love you," Camilla stammered, stumbling toward him in tears. Only this time the fear in her weeping was genuine. Alejandro recoiled as if she carried a plague. "Do not come near me," he commanded. "The engagement is over. The wedding is cancelled. I want you out of my house this instant." "What?" Camilla's eyes went wide with shock. "You can't kick me out? Where am I supposed to go?" "As for your belongings," Alejandro replied, "I'll have them sent to you tomorrow in trash bags, which is exactly where they belong." His voice was unforgiving. "Leave before I call the police and press charges for theft and child abuse. Because I have the evidence, Camilla, and believe me, I won't hesitate to use it if you don't vanish from my sight within 60 seconds. Camilla turned to her mother, pleading. "Mom, say something." Beatrice stood up, grabbed her purse, and regarded her daughter with ice-cold detachment. "Let's go, Camilla. You've humiliated yourself enough for one day. You have disgraced this family." It was the final nail in the coffin. Even her own mother had turned her back. Camilla let out a frustrated shriek, a wretched sound halfway between a howl and a hysterical sob. She glared at Valeria, who sat quietly, witnessing the scene with sadness rather than taking any pleasure in Camilla's downfall. "You!" Camilla screamed, stabbing a finger in Valeria's direction. "This is all your fault, you filthy servant! You're going to pay for this!" Camilla lunged at Valeria, but two security guards, whom Alejandro had discreetly summoned, intercepted her before she could take 2 steps. They grabbed her by the arms with zero hesitation or gentleness. "Let go of me! Do you have any idea who I am?" Camilla shrieked as they hauled her toward the exit. Her heels scraped against the floor tiles and her red dress twisted around her legs. She was the very picture of total defeat. Her wailing faded into the distance until the heavy front door slammed shut with a final, resonant thud. Boom! Silence reclaimed the dining room, but the tension had vanished. It was a peaceful silence, like the calm air after a violent storm has finally broken. Alejandro let out a long, heavy breath, looking as though a mountain had been lifted from his shoulders. He turned toward Valeria, who was still trembling slightly from the intensity of the confrontation. Ignoring the 50 guests watching them, he knelt beside her chair to meet her at eye level. "Forgive me," he said, gently taking her hands. "Forgive me for doubting you. Forgive me for letting you be treated that way. I was blind, but I swear to you, Valeria, as long as I breathe, no one will ever humiliate you again." Valeria looked into his eyes, and with that boundless kindness that defined her soul, she smiled through her tears. "There is nothing to forgive, sir. Just thank you. Thank you for believing in me." Alejandro stood up and addressed the room. "Dinner is over," he announced firmly. "Please show yourselves out. I need to go check on my children, and I have a conversation to finish with the woman who saved their childhood." The guests, stunned but aware they had just witnessed something unforgettable, began to file out in respectful silence. Alejandro and Valeria were left alone in the grand dining hall. He offered his hand to help her up. "Come on," he said. "Where to?" she asked. "Upstairs. Santi and Leo aren't asleep yet. They're waiting for their Val, and I think someone owes them a late-night pancake dinner." Valeria laughed, a genuine, crystal-clear sound that seemed to cleanse the heavy atmosphere of the mansion. "But sir, I can't cook in this gown." "Then tomorrow I'll buy you 1,000 more. But for tonight, you are the queen of this house." Together, they walked toward the staircase, ascending to where the children were waiting. There was no need for a kiss just yet. The air was already thick with a love forged in truth and righteousness. The antagonist had fallen, and a genuine family was beginning to rise from the wreckage of deceit. But hold on a second. Do you really think this ends with a simple happily ever after? Oh no, my friends. We still need the closure, the final reflection, and a look at life 1 year later. Because divine justice always saves a special gift for the end. Don't miss this final act because it is going to fill your soul with hope. Are you ready for the grand conclusion? You might have thought the story ended when the villain stormed out, but you clearly don't know how life works. A slamming door just stops the noise. The real healing happens in the silence that follows the storm, where happy endings are actually built. Dragging the trash to the curb is the easy part. The hard work is scrubbing away the stench it left on the walls. And that night at the Villaseñor estate, even with the witch named Camilla gone, 3 shattered hearts still needed urgent repair. Stay until the very last second, because the thing that Alejandro did for Valeria defies description, and I promise it will move you to tears. Alejandro and Valeria ascended the stairs in silence. It wasn't an awkward tension, it was a respectful, almost holy quiet. The tycoon, who hours earlier walked with the arrogance of a man who owned the world, now climbed the steps with profound humility, guiding the woman who, despite wearing a borrowed dress and nursing a patched-up soul, had become the true matriarch of the house. They reached the door to the twins' room. It was cracked open just a sliver. From inside came the sound of soft whimpers, the kind of resigned weeping that absolutely breaks your spirit. "Dad said she was coming back," Leo whispered in the shadows. "Grown-ups lie, Leo. Camila said Val was bad. Maybe she is gone forever," Santi replied, his voice sounding far too old and weary for a 3-year-old. Alejandro froze in his tracks. Those words hit him harder than a physical blow. Grown-ups lie. He vowed right then and there to never deceive his sons again. He looked at Valeria and nodded, signaling her to take the lead. Valeria gently pushed the door open. "Who said I wasn't coming back?" she asked with a voice as sweet as spun sugar and honey. The effect was instant. It was a miracle. The 2 little lumps under the covers sprang up as if launched by springs. They clicked on the bedside lamp, and when they saw her standing there like a fairy tale royal in her blue gown, their eyes went wide. "Val!" they shouted in unison. They didn't care about the expensive fabric. They didn't care about manners. They leaped from their beds barefoot and sprinted toward her. Valeria dropped to her knees on the plush rug, arms wide, catching the impact of 2 small bodies clinging to her like she was their only source of oxygen. Alejandro remained in the doorway, watching as she buried her face in their hair, breathing them in. He watched her tears soak into their pajamas and finally understood the true definition of a mother. It is not just the one who gives birth, folks. It is the one who brings light. And Valeria was illuminating the darkness for those boys. "I am so sorry I'm late, my loves. I am sorry," Valeria sobbed. I had to go find my princess dress." "Are you a real princess?" Santi asked, stroking the shimmering fabric in awe. Valeria looked up, locking eyes with Alejandro. He offered a tired but completely genuine smile. "Yes, Santi, she is the queen of this house," Alejandro said, stepping inside and sitting on the floor beside them. "That's right." The billionaire sat right on the carpet. "What about the witch?" Leo asked fearfully, looking toward the hallway. Alejandro smoothed his son's hair. "The witch is gone, champ. I put a magic spell on the door so she can never return. From now on, only good people are allowed in. Only people who love you." Nobody slept in their own beds that night. Alejandro ordered pillows and blankets, and the quartet camped out on the nursery floor, swapping stories and eating cookies that Pedro the driver smuggled upstairs. It was the first time in 2 years that Alejandro slept without needing medication. He drifted off to the sound of his children breathing, knowing the woman who breathed life back into them was just feet away. The day after, The offer of a lifetime. The next morning, the sun seemed to shine with a different intensity. That isn't cheap poetry, it is a fact. When the toxic energy leaves, the light just hits differently. Valeria was up early by habit, ignoring Alejandro's orders to rest. She was in the kitchen, but the maid's uniform was gone. She wore comfortable clothes Alejandro had purchased for her. She was making breakfast, filling the house with the aroma of fresh coffee and toast. Alejandro came downstairs still in his bathrobe, only to find her in the kitchen pouring fresh orange juice. "Valeria, I thought I told you to take the day off," he chided, though a warm grin betrayed his stern tone. "I know, sir, but idle hands make me jittery. Besides, these boys need a real meal after the charcoal disaster you served them yesterday," she teased with a laugh. They settled in for breakfast, him in his chair, her hovering by the table, until Alejandro caught her gaze with a heavy, serious look. "Valeria, sit down. We need to talk." Her stomach dropped. The memory of being fired was still raw. "Did I mess something up?" "No, you did everything perfectly, and that is exactly why we can't go on like this." He slid a leather binder across the table. "I am done employing you as a maid." Valeria's heart skipped a beat. Was she being let go? Again? But how? "You have too much brilliance and way too much soul to waste your life scrubbing my floors. I have a bigger vision for you." Alejandro flipped the folder open. "I'm hiring you as the estate manager. I want you to run the whole show. You hire the cleaning crew, you pick the chefs. As of today, you are finished washing dishes. Your job is to make sure my sons thrive, to turn this house back into a home." Valeria blinked, stunned. "But, sir, I don't have a degree for that." "You hold the only degree that matters in this house, a doctorate in human decency," Alejandro countered. "But if it's a piece of paper you want, look at page 2. Full tuition, already paid. Business administration or education, your choice. You go to class in the mornings while the boys are at school. I cover the costs, and your salary? Let's bump that to 3 times what you're making now. Plus, full benefits and premium health insurance for your mother." Tears spilled over. Valeria couldn't speak, just nodded, hand pressed to her trembling lips. It was everything she had prayed for, an education, safety for her mom, and staying close to the children she adored. "I only ask for one thing in return," Alejandro said, his voice dropping to a whisper, his gaze intense. "Name it, sir." "Teach me," he pleaded. "Teach me how to be a father, how to be like you. I spent years thinking a credit card was a hug. Show me how to make those dinosaur pancakes. Teach me how to play. I need to make up for lost time." A watery smile broke through as Valeria reached across the table to shake his hand. "You have a deal, Mr. Villaseñor. But be warned, I'm a tyrant when it comes to flower measurements." Fast forward 1 year later. Time is the ultimate judge. It has a way of balancing the scales, putting kings on thrones and clowns in circuses. 12 months have passed since that morning. So, what has changed? Take a look. The Villaseñor estate isn't a gray fortress anymore. The yard is a riot of color and toys. There is a golden retriever named Hercules tearing up the grass, and music floats on the breeze. It is the twins' 4th birthday. The garden is packed, but forget the stiff, boring cocktail parties of the past. We are talking bouncy castles, taco stands, and actual clowns. Alejandro's high-rolling partners are mingling with Valeria's neighbors from the barrio, shaking hands and sharing drinks. Alejandro finally realized that class doesn't mean exclusion. He is manning the grill, rocking an apron that reads, "The Grill Father." He is cracking up with Pedro the driver, looking 10 years younger. That permanent furrow of bitterness on his forehead? Gone. And Valeria, she is glowing. She just finished her first year of education school with high honors. Wearing a simple, stunning dress, she moves through the crowd with the grace of a matriarch, but the humility she never lost. Suddenly, a shadow falls over the front gate. A woman in designer gear, but it is outdated, frayed at the edges. Her hair is a brassy dye job, and dark circles hollow out her eyes. It is Camilla. Uninvited, obviously. She saw the party on social media. After the video scandal, her reputation turned to ash. Friends blocked her. Her mother, mortified, cut her off and banished her to a tiny apartment. Now she scrapes by selling catalog cosmetics, her soul eaten alive by resentment. She looks aged, not in years but in spirit. Peering through the iron bars, Camilla watches Alejandro wrap an arm around Valeria. She hears the boys squeal, "Mama Val!" She stares at the joy she tried to destroy, realizing she only helped build it stronger. That could have been mine. she whispers, a tear of pure envy cutting through her cheap makeup. Can I help you with something, ma'am? It is the security guard, Pedro, the very same driver, now promoted to head of security. Camilla flinches, trying to summon her old arrogance. No, just watching the help pretend they own the place. Disgusting. Pedro smiles, not with malice, but with pity. You are mistaken, ma'am. There is no help here. Just family looking out for family. Now keep moving. We don't want your bad vibes wilting the flowers. Camilla spins on her heel and marches off into solitude, the scrape of her scuffed stilettos against the pavement barely audible, as a thunderous eruption of cheers and laughter breaks out behind her. The kids have finally smashed the piñata wide open. It was the fade-out she deserved, a quiet exit from the stage. Overhead, the sun begins its descent, splashing the horizon in hues of burnt orange and deep violet. Alejandro grips the microphone. Friends, he says, and a hush falls over the crowd. 12 months ago, I came home early and nearly passed out from what I saw. I thought I was staring at a disaster. I thought I saw filth, but man was I blind. What I actually saw was life itself knocking at my front door. Alejandro scans the sea of faces until he finds Valeria. She is wiping chocolate off Leo's cheek, just like she did that first day. Valeria, he calls out. She looks up, cheeks flushing pink. Could you join me up here, please? Valeria steps forward, hesitant and shy. Alejandro sets the mic down, pulls a small black velvet box from his pocket, and, to the collective gasp of 300 guests, drops to one knee. He isn't looking at her like a boss looks at an employee. He is looking at her like a man looks at the love of his life. I'm not here to offer you an employment contract this time, Alejandro says, his voice cracking with raw emotion. I'm offering you my life. I want to be the father your children deserve if you'll agree to be the mother my kids have already chosen. Valeria Cardenas, will you do me the honor of marrying this grumpy old man and teaching him how to smile for the rest of his days? Valeria's hands fly to her mouth as tears stream down her face. Suddenly, the twins dash out and tackle Alejandro's legs in a bear hug. Say yes, Val. Say yes, the kids chant. Yes, she whispers, then finds her voice. Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Alejandro slides the ring onto her finger. It isn't some gaudy, massive rock like the one Camilla wore. It is a vibrant emerald, green for hope, circled by delicate sparks of light. He stands and pulls her close. The kiss is deep, gentle, and sealed with a vow of forever. The crowd goes absolutely wild. Fireworks. Alejandro had prepped for the just-in-case moment burst overhead, lighting up the night. For a split second, the whole world feels perfect. Now, for the takeaway. And that is how our story ends, my friends, with a lesson I hope you will carry deep in your chest. We live in a society obsessed with the surface, where the label on your shirt matters more than the legacy you leave in people's lives. Camilla had the looks, the cash, the status, but she was hollow inside. Valeria started with nothing but calloused hands and a massive heart, yet she walked away with it all. Never forget this: lies cannot outrun the truth, and karma always collects its debt. You might trick people for a season, but you cannot hustle the universe forever. Be like Valeria. Put love into your labor, treat every child like your own flesh and blood, and keep your chin up even when the world tries to drag you down. Because at the end of the day, whether you clock out early or late, it is not the luxury furniture that matters. It is the love waiting for you when you walk through the door. If this story tugged at your heartstrings, if you shed a tear of rage or joy, or if you believe real love is colorblind to bank accounts, hit that share button. Let's get this message to someone who really needs a ray of hope today. I am your storyteller and friend. And remember, sometimes angels do not have wings. Sometimes they wear yellow rubber gloves and smell like fresh vanilla. Catch you in the next story. Go give the person next to you a squeeze. Life is happening right now. Cut.